Thank you. And so my name is John Holdsclaw. I work for the National Cooperative Bank here in the United States. We are congressionally chartered in 1978, privatized in 81. I've been with the bank for 19 years. My job essentially is in strategic initiatives, which involves community development finance, cooperative expansion. I also head up our diversity, equity, and inclusion program, and then outreach to foundations. And I was a lobbyist for 20 years, so please don't judge me. Before I came over to the business development side, and I'm the board chair of a national organization called that represents what we call community development financial institutions. I don't think you all have those in the UK, but they're basically alternatives to banks that do work in low and moderate income communities. And the bulk of my work is in low and moderate income communities as well. Next slide, please. So, NCB basically was created to serve an underserved niche in this country, cooperatives. I had the pleasure of speaking to the Cooperatives UK folks at their cooperative study conference not too long ago, and there may be folks in this conference or meeting that attended there as well. I know you'll be hearing from, or maybe Rory's here as well, work with him on that. So we provide financial services to cooperatives, but the other part about the bank that's so incredible, I feel, is that we have this, per the charter, this mandate where we must make best efforts that 30% of all of our disbursements be in low and moderate income communities. And so I think that's what makes us very unique, because of that work that we do in low and moderate income communities. Next slide, please. Our common areas are obviously we do cooperatives, we do cooperative grocery stores, health centers. We do a lot of work with native corporations as a part of that mission lending piece that I talked to you about. In 2019, we committed more than $352 million to serving low-income communities across the country around that and cooperative development. And I promise you that's not me in that grocery store right there, but a nice picture that I found on our website yesterday. Next slide, please. And so I really enjoyed reading over the Quaker Principles, preparing for this, and just wanted to put up briefly some of the cooperative principles. My favorite one of all is concern for community, because I feel like there's no time like now, more than anything else, where there needs to be more concern for community, and definitely the democratic member control. One member, one vote, which is definitely getting its test here in the United States right now as it relates to the presidential campaign. Next slide, please. So just to really quickly, more than 12% of the 3 million cooperatives in the world, they employ more than 280 million people around the globe, 10% of the world's employed population. Next slide. And then from a US standpoint, 1 in 3 Americans are members of co-ops. We have a lot of credit unions here. They generate more than 2 million jobs each year. 92 million people turn to 7,500 credit unions. Although I work for a bank, I am a member of a credit union also. A lot of credit unions in rural electrics as well as farming. Next slide. Every year, NCB produces nation's top 100 revenue earning cooperatives. Definitely would, if you want to learn more, there are a lot of cooperatives like Ace Hardware here, and REI, Outdoor Store, as well as Ocean Spray Cranberry and Dunkin' Donuts are all purchasing co-ops, and a lot of people don't know that. So I definitely encourage everyone to go to ncb.coop to find out more about the Co-op 100. Next slide, please. Just want to show you all just a couple, Navy Federal, REI, Ace. Next slide. Okay, so that now that we've got past all the bank stuff, really wanted to just kind of use this cartoon to illustrate basically the climate in the US right now. Don't know how it is in the UK, but this basically sums it up for me, where you've got one set of folks on one side and another set on the other side, both blaming each other. And I think it's causing, in a lot of ways, a lot of the division that you see here in this country, and hopefully not around the world, but definitely what you see in this country. So I think that that cartoon basically captures the best of it, with each one of them pointing a finger at each other, basically blaming each other, and it's only going to get worse next January. Next slide. And so what this has led to is a lot of this civil unrest that you've seen in the U.S. that you probably have seen on the news there, and which will probably continue even now after the election has been settled. But it all comes from inequalities or disparities amongst the people. So next slide, please. So, for example, there's a wealth gap in this country. There's an income gap in this country. The unemployment rate is higher in this country for Black and brown people. A larger share of the Black population here lives in poverty and lack health insurance. It's amazing while COVID has impacted the entire world, here in the United States, it's really impacted the Black community even harder. Just for so many reasons, and the lack of adequate health care being one of them. My wife sadly lost her uncle a couple months ago in New Jersey during one of the outbreaks, and I think a lot of people in this country are preparing for another spike here going into the winter months. But what happens is, with these divisions, they never close. I always tell people this interesting fact about the U.S. that Black males make up 6.5% of the entire country, but we make up 43.5% of the prison population. And that's just an incredible, staggering number when you look at 2.3 million prisoners in this country, and Black males only make up 6.5% of the population, but we make up 43.5% of the prison population. And I think about that number sometime, and then I say to myself, well, should I even be afraid to? Should I be afraid to leave my house every day? All said, these inequalities will continue to grow. And what I try to express to the cooperators at the Cooperative UK conference was that, I think as a whole, it's time for cooperators. I think it's time for all people to the best of their abilities, stand up for what's right and want to be heard. I think you see that a lot here in this country with peaceful protests. I know that some have happened in the UK and around the world, but I think it's the divisions are not going to get better. And I think that it's important for all of us to do what we can to try to close those gaps. Next slide, please. This is a story that I really love to tell, because I feel like sometimes we think to ourselves, well, why me, or what can I do, or how can I contribute? So I always like to tell this story about what can a NASA custodian or environmental technician or janitor, or whoever you want to call them, can teach us. Next slide, please. So in 1962, President Kennedy, on the very start of the space exploration, visited Marshall Space Center in Alabama, and he was walking and noticed that there was a custodian, janitor, mopping the floor, sweeping the floor. And so he said to the custodian, he says, "Hey, I'm Jack Kennedy. What do you do here?" Next slide. And so with the President of the United States standing before him, the custodian replied, "Oh, Mr. President, I'm helping put a man on the moon." He didn't say I'm sweeping the floor. He didn't say I'm cleaning up. He said, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." Next slide. So to most people, what he was doing was just cleaning the building. In our office building in a pre-pandemic world, we see these folks all the time. And some of your offices, you may see them as well. But the point that I'm trying to get across is that no matter how large or small your role is in your organization, in your life, in your institutions, that you are a part of a larger story that's unfolding in your life, in your business, in your organization. And so we can all do our part by, in our own minds, working to put a man on the moon, or trying to impact all the things that are happening in society. Next slide. Tragically, and I want to leave you all with a quote, John Lewis, who was a longtime congressman and civil rights icon, passed away a little earlier this year. Definitely a huge loss to the country, a huge loss to to the world. But one of the things that he was really known for saying, and I love this saying, I have a T-shirt that has it on it. He implored people to not get lost in the sea of despair, to be hopeful, to be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. And never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. So I think it's important that we all as humans do our best to get into good trouble. And from that good trouble, hopefully, there'll be a sea of change. Obviously can't speak for the UK, but there needs to be a lot of good trouble made in the United States of America, because we definitely need to have a sea of change in a lot of different ways. And so, just a simple message to everyone today. Did not want to keep everybody long. Next slide, I think that may be the last one. Did not want to keep everybody long. That's my contact information, as well as social media stuff. If anybody wants to contact me or follow up any questions at all. I did see some questions in the chat, and I didn't know if you wanted to end that, and I could come back later on this afternoon. Somebody had asked a question about health initiatives. I want to make sure I answer that question. One of the things that we do is we finance community health centers. That's one of the things that I get the joy of working on. Because a majority of the health centers that we finance are in low and moderate income communities. So essentially, with lack of healthcare and no hospitals nearby, these health centers literally become the hub of the community, because it's the only place that someone who's non-insured can actually go to get adequate healthcare, number one. We also do a lot of grocery stores and food deserts here in the United States, where people sometimes have to travel miles to go to grocery stores. I live in Chapel Hill,